All right, peace and blessings, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in to this evening session. We have here with us Queen Deborah Watkins. She is the founder and executive director of a Black Education Network, and they're having a phenomenal event kicking off in Atlanta, Georgia. Now, you know what's going down in Black Hollywood. You know what's going to go down in Black Hollywood, and they are holding it down. It's the Following the Drinking Gourd to Atlanta, and the topic of discussion is practices for successfully teaching children and youth of African ancestry. I mean, she have a phenomenal lineup. Well, on this evening, there's so many of them, we're not going to go down the line, but we're going to tell you that we have some heavy hitters on this evening. We have Tony Browder, we have Chike Akua, Dr. Chike Akua, that's going to come on this evening. If any of you know anything about Dr. Ben or Astro Quasi, I am telling you, he's up there with them. He's been on the Rock Newman program. He's restoring the ancient artifacts over in the motherland. They're doing great work. They're dealing with African studies and empowering the people as it relates to our African ancestry to build back in us the African pride that we should have. Saint Kofa, they live by that. They believe in us going back and fetching that which we lost. And this queen here is the one who has a vision, who is a pioneer, who is spearheading this movement in Atlanta, bringing us all back, as a people, dealing with, your Moja, the 7 principles of Kwanzaa. If you heard about the 7 principles of Kwanzaa, listen, she lives by that. This is her, the Mother Africa. We're all birthed from the motherland. So we're going to bring her on so she can talk to us about this phenomenal program. How are you doing today? Go ahead and talk to us.
Thank you, first of all, Brother Mart, for all of your wonderful, wonderful words and for giving us an opportunity on your show to reach out to your audience through your Facebook Live. And the real heavy hitter is Tony Browder, who will be coming on right after me. I'm just honored to work with people like Tony. Tony will share with you how his work is an intersection, or how his work intersects with the Black Education Network. And also just why we decided to create this partnership 4 years ago that is now unfolding across the country. We're very excited about the intersection of Mr. Browder's work with the work of a Black Education Network. But before we get to the star of the show this afternoon, I'm going to give you a little information about a Black Education Network. I'm going to talk to you about some of the other headliners who will be at our conference in Atlanta this coming Saturday, January 12th. And I'm also going to talk to you about how your audiences across the country can get involved with the work of a Black Education Network. So first of all, let me start from the beginning. I grew up in predominantly white communities, went to predominantly white schools, learned essentially nothing about my heritage. And when I was a junior in high school, there was a white English teacher who taught an African-American literature class at my high school. And of course, I took it and I just thought, wow, you mean our people are writing books? I mean, we're talking the 60s, okay, the late 60s. I graduated from high school in 1971. So that gives you a little bit of idea of how long I've been on this journey of learning more about my own ancestry and the beauty of my roots, my African roots. Fast forward, I studied to be a high school English teacher and went to Stanford for graduate school, got my first master's in education from Stanford in 1977. I'm giving you some historical context here. And then I started teaching in a high school in the heart of Silicon Valley. It was the first brand new high school built in Silicon Valley in 25 years, a beautiful state-of-the-art high school called Independence. And there, I helped start the Black Student Union, the first Black Student Union in the school's, short history. And I knew then that there was something wrong with the education of Black children. We're talking 1977 here, because very few of them were in my college prep English classes. So fortunately, at the time, there was another group of active educators in an organization called Black Educators of East Side, BEES. And 5 years into my teaching career, the Black Educators of East Side and the Black Educators of Allen Rock School District, they joined forces and created the Santa Clara County Alliance of Black Educators. So from 94 to 2001, so I was a founding member of the Santa Clara County Alliance of Black Educators. And again, why? Why do we need organizations outside the school systems to help Black children? Because the systems are inherently racist and they were not designed for the success of our children, as Carter G. Woodson told us back in the 30s in his seminal book entitled The Miseducation of the Negro. So from 94 to 2001, I was actually the president of the Santa Clara County Alliance of Black Educators. And then in 2001, well, actually in 1998, in 1998, I started talking to some other Black activists in the community about starting a STEM program for Black students, science, technology, engineering, and math. And so we called it the Dr. George Washington Carver Scholars Program, and Intel picked it up. So it became the Intel Carver Scholars Program. Now, mind you, all of my work is unapologetically focused on Black people. Any people that benefit from our work, that's fine, but really my life work has been devoted to the uplift of African people throughout the diaspora. So we started the STEM program. Intel picked it up. It was amazing for the next 3 years. Unfortunately, the men who I founded it with were not interested in allowing Intel to take it nationally, and so they were short-sighted, unfortunately. So I left. It died. Parents came to me and said, "You need to start another STEM program." So 18 years ago, Brother Amar, 18 years ago, I started a STEM program for Black students in Silicon Valley, another one named after Dr. Frank Green, who was a pioneering engineer in Silicon Valley, right there with those Intel founders and the Applied Materials, National Semiconductor founders. Well, I'm happy to report that that program is now in its 18th year. 100% of our students go to college. 90% of them graduate in 4 years with their BA or BS degrees, and 60% of those degrees are in STEM, which is 8 times the national average for Black students. So it is an award-winning program. Our funders read like a who's who in Silicon Valley. So when they say that our children can't do STEM, I remind them of the pyramids and that it was Nubian African people built those pyramids. And even though people try to obscure that history and make it appear as though other non-Africans did create the pyramids, we let our children know, and through Mr. Browder's work, we get to go to Kemet and we get to see the evidence that our ancestors built those pyramids. So the STEM work is very much aligned with Tony Browder's work of uncovering, excavating a 25th century tomb. And again, I'll let him talk more about that, but that's one alignment that's amazing for us. All right, let me fast forward to Mr. Browder and why I've decided to take his work on the road, as well as the work of Dr. Chike Akua, who's also on your show tonight, and three other people who are not on your show, Kobe Wilkerson, Dr. Stephen Hancock, and Hashim Jabbar. Well, that brings us full forward. That brings us to this space in this time. That brings us to this space in this time. And basically, when I started the California Alliance of African American Educators in 2001, I partnered with Stanford University's School of Education, specifically Dr. Linda Darling Hammond, and asked her if she would underwrite our institute. And from the beginning, Amar, from the beginning, the institute was entitled Pedagogies and Practices for Successfully Reaching African American Students. Again, that's our unapologetic focus. So Dr. Linda Darling Hammond happened to have a $3 million left on a $5 million grant. And she absolutely said, yes, I will underwrite your institute. And so the first year we had Dr. Bob Moses of the Algebra Project as our keynoter. The second year we had Dr. Beverly Daniel Tatum. She wrote Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria? Third year we had Dr. Gloria Ladson Billings as our keynote speaker. She wrote Dream Keepers, Successful Teachers of African American Students. Fourth year we had Pedro Noguera. Let me just say, well, let's just go past Pedro Noguera. The fifth year we had Dr. Wade Nobles, who is one of the founders of the Association of Black Psychologists, ABPSI. The sixth year we had Lisa Delpit. She's the author of Other People's Children, and Multiplication is for White Folks, or something like that. And then the seventh year we decided to bring in Dr. Shiraki Holly, who was running the highest performing charter school for Black students at the time in LA Unified School District. And so we brought in Shiraki to show them what the pedagogy looked like applied to schools that were serving Black children. And these schools were high performing. It was a high performing school called the Culture and Language Academy of Success. So that was our seventh year. And eighth year, we brought in Carol Lee, Dr. Carol Lee, and her husband, who used to be called his former name was Don Lee, but now it's Hakeem Matubuti. They run the oldest independent Black school in the country in Chicago. It is the Barbara Sizemore Betty Shabazz School. And so I wanted Dr. Lee to talk about, how they apply the pedagogy in her school. So she came on, Dr. Lee, that was in 2000. I mean, that was I think I've lost track, but I think it was our seventh, our eighth speaker. And our ninth speaker, all this is on our website, but our ninth speaker, I brought back Dr. Bob Moses because people were still wringing their hands in California about how to teach math to Black students. And he wrote the roadmap. Dr. Bob Moses wrote the roadmap on how to teach algebra to Black children and any underperforming children. He's a brilliant MacArthur Genius Fellow, Harvard PhD. And the 10th year, I brought in Dr. Geneva Gay. Dr. Geneva Gay wrote the book Culturally Relevant Pedagogy. Now, Dr. Gloria Ladson Billings coined the phrase culturally relevant teaching, but Dr. Geneva Gay wrote the book called Culturally Relevant Pedagogy. So she went deeper with the teaching that even Dr. Ladson Billings had gone. Now, I share this history about our institutes because it brings me to the one in 2017 when I had Tony Browder, Dr. Chike Akua, Kobe Wilkerson, Dr. Stephen Hancock. Yeah, when I had those four men keynote our institute, it was so well received by the audience that I decided I have to take this, I call it my dream team. I have to take this dream team on the road so that other people can learn about the incredible resources that these men bring to the table. So I'm excited that today your listening audience is going to hear from two of those rock stars, part of my dream team, Tony Browder and Dr. Chike Akua. But one of these days, you're going to have Kobe Wilkerson on, Hashim Jabbar, and also Dr. Stephen Hancock, because they complete the dream team. Now, for your listeners who are in Atlanta, they still have an opportunity to sign up to register. They have until Tuesday, January 8th to register for our conference on Saturday, and they will get to hear these five people that are that will be basically sharing practices for successfully reaching students and youth of African ancestry. Now, I will say that it is the third in a series of conferences that we've held. The first, are you trying to say something to me, Amar? You're on mute. Oh, okay, no, okay. I want to make sure. Okay, as the third in a series, our first conference with the Dream Team was in Philadelphia, October 6th, and our second conference was in Chicago, October 20th. And we were so well received in every one of those cities that people within the audience have vowed to bring us back. And I'm happy to report to your listening audience in Chicago that we have some dates. Right now, March 22nd and 23rd, the Dream Team will be back in Chicago, again, dropping some serious knowledge about how to successfully reach African American students. That's what we do. So I failed to mention, because I'm watching my time, and I want to get to the main event, but I failed to mention that 2 years ago, I changed the name of the California Alliance of African American Educators to a Black Education Network, because people kept saying to me, you've done a lot of really great work in California, but we need you all over the state. Our children are not doing well all over the country. They're failing miserably. And you've been able to graduate 100% of the students in your program, send 90% of them to college, and have 60% of those students earn STEM degrees, which is, just unheard of in this country. We're the only all African American science fair west of the Mississippi that we know of. We're certainly the only long-term program of its type. We begin in 3rd grade with our STEM students, and we stay with them until they graduate from high school. So as young from 3rd grade to 12th grade, we make sure that our children do not fall through the cracks. Okay, now I want to talk for a minute about how I connected with Mr. Browder. And since he's your next guest, it'll be a good segue into his presentation. And I know he's standing by, and so I'm excited to listen to what he has to say. I know Dr. Chike Akua is standing by too. I'm excited to listen to what they have to say. And your listening audience is in for an amazing treat today. So in 2012, Dr. Joyce King, Dr. Ivor Carruthers, and I convened 45 people in Atlanta to create a national convening of conscious Black people, conscious Africans who were serious about the conditions in our communities. Everything from mass incarceration to a lack of college completion to STEM, family engagement, you name it. We were going to be addressing all of these things. So we created a conference, and it was held in October of 2012 at the Westin O'Hare in Chicago. 200 conscious Black people from all over the country came to the conference, and it was off the chain. Well, the next year we went back to Chicago, and that's the year that Dr. Joyce King suggested that we ask Tony Browder to come and be one of our keynote speakers. That year, we were inducting Dr. Frances Cress Welsing into our wisdom circle, Dr. Naeem Akbar, Dr. Wade Nobles, Malik Yakini, and Ivor Carruthers into what we called our wisdom circle. These are the elders that we respect, love, revere, and they've informed the work of a Black Education Network from the beginning. So that year, Tony Browder came as a keynote speaker, and he got there a few minutes early. This is my favorite story. He got there a few minutes early, and he called me on the phone because I was in charge of all the travel arrangements for our speakers. And he said, Deborah, my room isn't ready yet. What do you want me to do? And I said, I've got a small suite up here as one of the conference conveners, and my daughter's here to help me from California with the conference. So I'm just getting ready still. So you're welcome to come up and, just wait, until your room is ready, and, we'll go from there. And so I told my daughter, so one of our guest speakers is coming up to the room. His name is Tony Browder. And my daughter said, Tony the Tony Browder? The Tony Browder. And I said, how do you know Tony Browder? And she said, when I was 16, my daughter's 30, she was 36 at the time, Amar. She said, my daughter said to me, she said, when I was 16, you put me in a camp for Black children called Camp Keeley, and we read from the Browder file. I said, you're kidding. She said, no, mommy, I read from the Browder file, and that book transformed my life. So my own daughter was affected by Mr. Browder's book, 25 years ago. And she's now 41 years old, and a mother of her own, and a wife and 2 children. And she's raising her children to be conscious of their African roots. In fact, she married a Nigerian. So my granddaughter has both a Nigerian passport and an American passport. And she's been to the continent 6 times. She's been to Nigeria 6 times, and she's only 12. So she's quite international already. So Mr. Browder keynoted. He was one of our keynote speakers at that convening in Chicago at the Westin O'Hare in 2013. And I was like, okay, he sounds interesting, but wasn't blown away by Mr. Browder at that time. So a few months later, Pan-African City Alive, owned by Keisha Evans and Pete Evans, had Tony Browder and his daughter Atlantis come to Sunnyvale to their Pan-African City Live store. And I attended the event, and I was so struck by the synergy that existed between Tony and his daughter Atlantis, that I decided I have to find a way to bring both of them to California on a regular basis so that they can impart their knowledge to the children here in Silicon Valley. So that's how that partnership began, Amar. I started bringing Tony, first I brought him out to do what was going to be a rites of passage with 100 Black boys from Silicon Valley. And it didn't turn out quite to be what we thought it was going to be. So we switched sort of gears and created another program that Tony named the Cultural Imperative Initiative. And we were working with about 100 students in 3 high schools in Silicon Valley. Mind you, Silicon Valley is only 3% Black, okay? 3% Black. So to have somebody like Tony Browder coming out, imparting knowledge to Black children in a valley that's, predominantly, non-Black, predominantly white, is really quite something. He was well received by the children and their parents, by the way. So we decided last year, yes, I went to Kemetic with him in August of 2017, and one of the ladies from Chicago, one of the ladies from Houston, after his first night, every night before we go visit the tombs or the other sites, Tony would do a lecture about what we were going to experience before we went to the site. And so on the first night, we were in Cairo. You can see the pyramids from our beautiful hotel room. And the woman said, I'm 60 years old, just learning about my history. This is terrible. Tony, do you do anything with younger people? I don't want this generation to wait until they're 60 years old to learn about our African greatness. So Tony said, Deborah, tell them what we do in San Jose. And so I stood up and I told the people what we do in San Jose. And there was a great interest in the group to basically replicate what we do. And Tony and I had already planned to replicate what we do, but we just weren't going to do it that soon. So we ended up replicating in 4 cities last year. The Browder, what we were calling the Browder Scholars Program at that time, and now we call it the Cultural Imperative Program. And then this year, starting this month, we're so excited to announce to everybody that 10 sites around the country are rolling out the Cultural Imperative Program. And with that, I have about 4 minutes left, and I'm going to open the microphones. If you have questions from your viewers, I'm happy to answer those, but I will be staying on the call to listen to Mr. Browder, to listen to Dr. Akua. And I just want to thank you once again for having me on your show. I appreciate it.
You are welcome. So which elder we gonna have come up next?
Well, we're gonna have Tony Browder come. I don't know if you've received any questions from your reader, from your viewers, or if you want us to just move right into the next segment. But again, I just want to emphasize, let me just say that people can register for our conference at ABEN, ABEN, the number 4, ACE.org, ABEN4ACE.org. ABEN stands for a Black Education Network, the number, so it's a Black Education Network 4, and then A stands for Academic and Cultural Excellence. Everything we do is in an academic and cultural excellence frame. And so ABEN4ACE.org. And that's where people can, they can just go to our website. The first thing that will pop up on the homepage is a link to the January 12th conference in Atlanta. We still have space, but the deadline for registrations is this coming Tuesday, January 8th. And so we want to make sure that you share that with your viewers. That's pretty much all I have to say. And Mr. Browder is going to come in next. And you know, he's an expert. I'm not accustomed to doing radio interviews or, you know, internet interviews. I like to work behind the scenes, and
okay.
I like to get these brilliant men and women. I forgot to mention that we also have Dr. Joyce King, who is legendary in the Black education space. She is the main convener of the Atlanta conference. She'll be there. She's actually also the one who was Dr. Chike Akua's doctoral advisor at Georgia State University. She's brilliant and amazing. Joyce, Dr. King, is really responsible for me doing this national work. She's the one who kept saying, you know, you need to do this work on a national scale. So Dr. Joyce King, and there is a special panel that talks about the effect of gentrification on schooling. So again, I'm sure that you can put the flyer, you can post our flyer on your Facebook page, right, Amar?
Absolutely, we'll do.
Okay. So the flyer that Amar will place on his Facebook page will have all the details. So without further ado, I'd like to ask Mr. Tony Browder to come on in his own way and do his thing.
Greetings, good people. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Elder.
We can hear you. We can't see you, but we can hear you.
That's all right. You've seen enough of me in the last couple of years.
Okay, Mr. Browder.
How are you all doing?
Doing well, thank you. And yourself?
I'm good, brother. I'm good. We're 1 week into a new year, which is essentially a continuation of last year. We'll improve on the things that we didn't get quite right. We'll make other things better. And we're going to kick it off with a wonderful gathering this coming weekend in Atlanta. So I'm pleased to be a part of this. What Deborah refers to it as a dream team. It's all that and so much more. It's a team of some of the best educators, some of the finest minds in the country who are dedicated to providing a process, a formula, a blueprint, a path toward rescuing the minds of our children. And I trust that we'll have a wonderful turnout in Atlanta as we did in Chicago and Philadelphia, so that we can help train the minds that will transform the consciousness of Black people and allow us to begin to take our rightful place in the world. So you got any questions for me, brother?
Yeah, so how long have you been doing the work that you've been doing over in the motherland. We do know that also you have a great work going on over there. And, how can people support you via, monetary donations?
Well, first things first, this year marks my 40th anniversary as an entrepreneur. I established my first business 40 years ago. My formal training is in graphic arts and design. So
Congratulations.
I established my graphic arts studio, East Coast Graphics, in 1979. And it was that journey into entrepreneurship that really allowed me to purchase my freedom. So I've been self-employed since 1979 for the last 40 years and had the opportunity now to use my skills to make as much money as I wanted to and to spend that money pursuing things of interest to me. That is buying books, reading and studying books about African and African-American history and culture, traveling to conferences, to attend events organized by the authors of those books. And then in 1980, I began traveling to Egypt. So 38 years ago, I made my first trip to Egypt. And as a result of that trip, that transformative trip, I spent 13 days on the Nile with Dr. Ben. And those 13 days proved to me the extent to which I have been miseducated, and that I had the opportunity to see with my own eyes information that was not a part of my formal educational process. And as a result of my being inspired beyond belief after that trip, I established my second company, which is IKG, was known then as the Institute of Karmic Guidance. But I established that company primarily to create a vehicle so that I could share the new information I was learning about ancient Egypt and Africa with audiences here in DC initially. And that has opened the door for me to do so many other things. I've been to Egypt probably over 70 times since then, and 56 of those trips have been to Egypt alone. This year, 2019, also marks the 32nd anniversary of our Egypt on the Potomac field trips, a field trip that I created after my second trip to Egypt in 1985, when I discovered architectural similarities between structures right here in Washington, DC, and similar architectural structures that I'd seen in Egypt. So I did research on the layout, design, and development of Washington, and that research led to the creation of our Egypt on the Potomac field trip, which has been going strong, actually since 1986. So this is our 33rd anniversary of Egypt on the Potomac. And then, brother, February the 1st will mark the 30th anniversary of the publishing of my very first book, From the Browder File. So that book has, in the last 30 years, it has been a perennial bestseller. We've sold well over 250,000 copies of that book. And From the Browder File ranks among the top 3 books read among incarcerated brothers and sisters. So it is considered by many bookstores as a gateway to the study of African and African-American history and culture. So this year, we're also commemorating the 10th anniversary of the Aasif Restoration Project, a project that we established in 2008 to honor the legacy of Dr. Asa Hilliard. We have, for the past decade, been funding and fully participating in the archaeological excavations in an area on the west bank of Luxor known as South Aasif, where we are now restoring the tombs of 2 Kushite noblemen by the name of Karabashkin and Karakamin. We are on track to complete the restoration and open those tombs in 5 years in 2023. So as you asked earlier, if anyone is interested in supporting our works, in traveling to Egypt with us or working on our excavation mission, they can go to our website, which is ikg-info.com. That's ikg-info.com. Find out what we're doing and to make a financial contribution to support our efforts or to purchase any of our publications.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for answering those questions. And being that you're a very educated Mwalimu, and for those who listening, that means teacher in Swahili. You know, who inspired you to go on this path that you're on? And it's a two-part question. And the second question is, Baba, what is some literature that you recommend for us to read to help self-educate ourselves?
Well, my my journey to enlightenment, as I called it, began in 1974 when I graduated from Howard, and graduated with the bachelor's in graphic design and advertising. Yet I felt I was unprepared for the world, to face the world as a Black man. And I stumbled upon a brother in DC who is an Akan priest. And he sponsored a series of classes on African spirituality. And after taking those classes for 7 weeks, I found what I was looking for. I found information that resonated with my soul and put me on a path that allowed me to begin the process of knowing who I was and fulfilling my purpose in life as a man of African ancestry. And it was that class which led to my developing an interest in Egypt, particularly and initially interest in the pyramids. And then 3 years later, February 21st, 1977, I had the opportunity to meet Dr. Ivan Van Sertima, who had just published his book, They Came Before Columbus. And it was during that presentation where Van Sertima talked about Africans who had visited Americas before Columbus and left their evidence in Mexico. And Van Sertima mentioned that those Africans were Egyptians and the Egyptians were Black. That was the first time in my life anyone ever told me that the Egyptians were Black. I grew up in Chicago. I grew up loving school, reading everything I could get my hands on, but nowhere in my formal education did I ever learn or ever read or ever hear or ever see anything that identified the builders of the greatest and oldest documented civilization known to mankind as being African. So I was blown away. And that then put me on the path to discover what I refer to as forbidden knowledge, information that has intentionally been withheld from people of African ancestry primarily. And I discovered Dr. Ben and Dr. Clark and John Jackson and Asa Hilliard. And after that, it was over. You know, my mind was blown, my mind was freed, and I found what I was supposed to do with my life. So those are my sources of inspiration. And I was fortunate to have had the opportunity to have met, you know, these scholars and to have worked with these scholars and to develop friendships with these scholars. So particularly two men who I was particularly close to were John Henry Clark and Asa Hilliard. Asa wrote the introduction to my first book, From the Browder File. Dr. Clark wrote the introduction to my second book, Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization. So to be in their midst and to sit at their feet and to walk the path that they walked has really prepared me for the work that I'm doing, that I've been doing over the last 40 years. So when I think in terms of books that are important to me, one of my Bibles is John G. Jackson's Introduction to African Civilization, Asa Hilliard's Saba, The Reawakening of the African Mind, Teofilo Benga's book, African Philosophy, the Pharaonic Period, is a classic of mine. And there's so many others, but these are books that have left an indelible impression on my mind. And of course, you know, Stolen Legacy also ranks as one of the seminal books, along with the Journal of African Civilizations, which Ivan Van Sertima published, and was responsible for helping. This is my personal thought, brother, that it was Ivan Van Sertima's work, particularly through the Nile Valley Conference in 1984 and the publishing of the Journal of African Civilizations, that paved the way for the African-centered movement. And what those scholars did was to bring the knowledge of Kemet foremost into the consciousness of people of African ancestry all around the world. That then made it possible for people to begin to read the works of Dr. Ben, to begin to become familiar with the works of Cheikh Anta Diop, Teofilo Benga, and so many others. So it's paved the way for this interest in Kemet that has consumed my life and the work that we're currently doing with the Aasif Restoration Project.
Baba, in your wisdom, why is it so important for us to get back in touch with our culture?
Well, the truth of the matter is that the fundamental truth is that African people are the oldest people on the planet. There is an exhibit at the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History, which documents the origins of mankind. And in that exhibit, which is about almost 20 years old now, they stated that 200,000 years ago, Africans were the only people on the planet. They said that 60,000 years ago, a group of Africans living in East Africa walked east and populated Asia, ultimately the Americas, North, Central, and South America, and the islands in the Caribbean. They also stated that approximately 40,000 years ago, another group of these same Africans walked west and populated Asia. So that simple piece of information tells us that the very first people in the world, in Asia, in the Americas, and in the landmass that we now call Europe, were African people. And just recently, toward the end of last year, there was an article done on excavations in a cave in Israel, in which they found stone tools and dating the layer of the soil where these stone tools were found, pushed back the dates for the migration of Africans out of Africa into the West to approximately 30, no, it's, let me make sure I get the dates right, 300,000 years ago, 300,000 years ago. So brother, if we just do the math, if Africans have been living, thinking, and creating for 300,000 years, and as geneticists have just recently proved that mutated Africans became Europeans 7,000 to 8,000 years ago, that means that African people have a 292,000 year head start on Europeans, which means if we really understand the science behind what we're never taught in school, that we are our ancestors. We carry in our bodies, we carry in our souls and our spirits, energy connecting us to all of our ancestors from the beginning of time. And it is that connection, it is that ancestral connection which we have access to. And it is by knowing who you are and acting on that knowledge and being true to yourself, true to those ancestors who have been responsible for bringing you into existence, that they can speak through you, they can teach you, and they transform your consciousness. So that is who we are. And one of the goals of the project that we're currently engaged in with ABEN, a Black Education Network, is to help make educators aware of who they are and the genetic legacy that we are carrying with us, and our obligation to see to it that our children are in an environment where they can be loved, where they can be affirmed, where they can begin to become the vessels through which their ancestors will speak and do their best work. So this is the process through which this whole moment in time is unfolding. And I really am at a point in my life, I'm at a point in my career where I feel the need to stress that reality over and over and over again. We notice right here in America, more specifically right here in Washington, D.C., profound dysfunction coming from the so-called leader of the free world, the most powerful human being on the world. We've never seen this level of dysfunction in U.S. history, and people are acting as if it's okay. They're not challenging the nonsense that is coming out of the federal government, and as a consequence, everybody is suffering, not just here in Washington, D.C., not just here in the United States of America, but all around the world. So we are witnessing the beginning stages of a profound shift of culture and humanity. And it's a process that was set in motion at least 400 years ago with the beginning of the Ma'afa. It's a process that was set in motion by the decimation of the indigenous people of this land. It was a process that has continued to be set in motion by the disrespect, profound disrespect for the environment, by the pollution of the air and the water and the raping of the earth. So Ma'at is real. Truth and justice and righteousness is real. And so if your eyes are open and if you are in tune with what is happening, not just in your own life, but in the world, then you see things are shifting. And as a result of that shift, those who are in power, who have abused power, are going to be swept out of power. And so when that profound sea change happens, there's going to be a void. And the question then becomes, how prepared will African people be to fill that void and become the determiners of their own destiny? So what our responsibility is, those of us who are the professed knowledge keepers, who have been doing the work, who've been writing, who've been sharing this information, what our job is to begin to reach out to as many people as possible, to awaken as many minds and souls as possible, to help African people get out of the sunken places that we found ourselves in and begin to make a choice as to how we wish to live our lives. And the sooner we can reach young people and get them to understand who they are and get off of Facebook and get their face in a book, the sooner we can get them to understand that everything that is important in their lives is recorded in a book. So by becoming literate, by cultivating an appetite for reading, thinking, learning, applying what you've read, you can become the master of your destiny. That is why we're here. And so the times demand that we think differently, speak differently, and act differently, and pave the way for the generations who are coming behind us.
Thank you, Baba, for answering those questions. My next one is about the pyramids. I believe so many do not understand who actually were the ones who resided within the pyramids. So many people, they think that the whole nation of the Cometians resided in the pyramids. If you would be so kind to expound upon the significance of the pyramids, for those who lack that knowledge, that'll be great.
Okay, well, a couple of things about pyramids, a couple of fundamental things about the pyramids we need to understand. One, pyramid is a Greek word. Two, pyramids were not tombs. So this story that we've been fed, that pyramids were tombs for kings, pyramids were tombs for pharaohs, is a falsification of African history. The Kemetic word for pyramid is mir, and the word mir means the place of ascension. So African people were the first people that we know of in the world who created customs and rituals associated with the burying of the dead and honoring ancestors. So there were rituals that were developed and specific ways that the dead were prepared for burial and interned. So they were interned in tombs that were under the earth. And for those who could afford it, they would place a mir over the tomb. Now, the word mir actually literally means the place of ascension. Mir means the place of ascension. So then the purpose of a mir was to facilitate the ascension of the soul buried in the tomb underneath it into heaven, where that soul would be reborn. So there are, at last count, 118 mir in Kemet. and there are no burial chambers in any of them. They were all built over tombs. They were all built over burial chambers. In the 5th dynasty, near Saqqara, we have the earliest examples of writing inside of one of these tombs underneath a mirror. And that mirror was built for the king Unas. The text in his burial chamber is mistakenly referred to as pyramid text. This text, pyramid text, is the oldest religious text ever recorded. It is inscribed on the walls of his burial chamber, of his tomb. So it's well over 4,000 years old. And it describes the process of the salvation of the soul of the deceased. In this instance, the king Unas, the process for the salvation of the soul, the process that his soul must go through in order to declare his innocence in the hall of judgment, the process of having his heart, the Kemetic equivalent, symbolic equivalent of his soul, weighed opposite the feather Ma'at, while he recited the 42 declarations of innocence, the process by which he will be led to a Tsar who is seated on the throne of judgment, who will make the declaration as to whether or not his soul goes to a specific place in the afterlife. The idea of a specific place in heaven where all souls go to be judged is all documented in the oldest religious text known to man. So we also find that the mirror served as a place where the rulers of Kemet were buried. And since the rank and file, the majority of people living in Kemet were not kings or queens, the majority of people living in Kemet or a substantial portion of the people who lived in Kemet were members of what we would call today the middle class. They were the architects, the engineers, the priests, the priestesses, the physicians, the dentists, the designers, the masons, and they were responsible for building all the temples, building the mirror, writing the sacred texts. And so these people couldn't afford to be buried in a mirror, but they also were buried in tombs that contained some of the same messages that were in the tombs for the kings. Papyrus scrolls that documented their journey to the halls of Ma'at, where they would declare their innocence, the process by which they would also be taken to a Tsar seated on the throne of judgment and be judged Ma'at Keru, a truer voice, so that they can reap their rewards in the afterlife. So there was a method by which everybody could begin to participate in this journey into the afterlife. And what I can tell you, brother, from my own personal experiences, 10 years of digging and excavating in a tomb and getting to understand the mindset of these Africans, what I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt is that the ancient Kemites did not have a preoccupation with death. They had a preoccupation with life. They understood that there is no death. There is only life after life, that we come back. The body is temporary, but the soul and the spirit are eternal. And that there are means by which that soul can be, the soul can be evaluated, the means by which the spirit can begin to infuse that soul into a new body when that person comes back to earth to continue their journey again. So if you really unpack the mythology of ancient Kemet, specifically the study of Asar, Set, and Heru, the story of Asar, it is the story of the Rehemi Mesu, the repetition of the birth. It is the story of Asar dying and then being born again as his son Heru, and setting up the process by which all the people of Kemet could participate in the cyclical journey of life, right? So what is really required by us is to study and get a deeper understanding of these sacred texts, what they really meant, and how we can apply this knowledge in our lives today in order to connect with this same energy that inspired our ancestors, that is available to us today, so that we can rebuild the greatness that our ancestors bequeathed to the world over 3,000 years ago.
Wonderful. Thank you again so much for answering those questions, Baba. So is there any takeaway that you want people to home in on this phenomenal event? Because we know the school to prison pipeline, system set up, and we definitely are excited about what you and the rest of the scholars are doing on this upcoming Saturday on January the 12th. And is there something that you want, a nugget that you want the elders within the community to glean from, to take back to the community, to the younger generation?
Well, as one of my teachers, John Henry Clark, reminded us, all history is a current event. All history is a current event. The events that happened 5,000 years ago, 500 years ago, 5 years ago, or 5 minutes ago have set in motion processes which will shape what will happen 5 minutes from now, 5 years from now, 500 years from now, 5,000 years from now. So all history is a current event. That being the case, the more of our history we know, the more we can be fully engaged in current events and shape our future. So it's imperative that we understand that our story does not begin with slavery. Our story does not begin with the Ma'afa. That if we were to look at a timeline of African history, we'll find that, let's just say philosophically speaking, if the story of African people was a book of 1,000 pages, the story of our enslavement would begin on page 996 and would only be 2 pages long. So why would we begin at the end of a book and act as if those 2 pages represent everything we ever were and everything we have the capacity to become? Let us do what Dr. Hilliard referenced we should do, and that is to return to the source. Return to the source of knowledge. So we go to the Nile Valley because it is there where we will find the greatest amount and the oldest documented evidence of what human beings have done when they were in charge of their destiny. So it is about reading, it is about studying our past as interpreted by our scholars, and then understanding that we have the capacity today to utilize that knowledge in order to shape the world that our children will inherit and that we will ultimately be born back into. So the takeaway for the work that we're doing at these educational conferences through ABEN is to educate educators and share with them knowledge that many of them have never been exposed to, and help them understand that we are still under attack. We are still dealing with vestiges of slavery, and that the only way that we can effectively change that situation is by changing our minds. We may not have direct control over the systems that govern us, but we have control over ourselves. And when we act in a responsible manner, act as culturally conscious and committed men and women have the capacity to act, we change our thinking, we change our speech, we change our actions, and we change the environment around us. And it's through that consistent change that we force others to get off of our backs. We inspire those who are looking to get up off their knees. And then we marshal forces with those who are also like-minded beings and who want to take responsibility for their lives and shape a future that we will inherit. For me, that is the greatest expression of freedom. And anyone who has lived long enough knows that freedom is not free, and that you have to fight for your freedom. You have to fight to hold on to it. You have to fight to instill a sense of freedom into your children, into young folk, and then you've got to protect all the things that you fought for. So this life is not just for standing on the sidelines and waiting for someone else to free you or waiting for someone else to save you. This life is all about you doing the things that you were born on this earth to do, by tapping into all of the strength, all of the wisdom, all of the guidance that we have inherited from our ancestors that is here available to us. So once we begin to understand who we are and the strength that we carry within, then nothing stands in our way. So our oppressors are aware of that, which is why they have always oppressed us and will continue to oppress us until we decide as individuals and as a collective that we will no longer be oppressed. We will be totally committed to our freedom. And as we move in that direction, others within our community will see that they have options as to how they can live their lives. And it's by modeling for people what real manhood and womanhood is all about, is how we begin to gain respect for ourselves and the respect of others in the world, and model what real human beings are supposed to do when they're in charge of their destiny. So that's the process that's unfolding. That is the spirit that will be in full effect this Saturday in Atlanta. And I know for certain that everyone who comes will be transformed, and they will be given tools to continue that transformation. And the hope is that they will go out and favorably influence those within their classrooms and those within their communities, so that we can be about the business of being permanently free.
Ashe, Baba. So the floor is definitely yours if you'd like to add anything additionally. This completes my question and answer session for myself. Out there, a lot of feedback. Patipa Brown, you know, she said that it definitely does her heart good to hear you teach that the Cometians are of color. You know, we're dark-skinned people. You know, so she said she's excited about that, and also that she's able to come back. You know, these numbers from lifetimes because she's able to get it right this time.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to read. So I just wanted to read that to you. You know, she's elated about the teachings, and thank you once again for sharing that with us. And also, for my Queen Amani Mari and I, we are humbled that you came on and shared your wisdom with us, and we're looking forward to further supporting you in the cause.
Well, I certainly appreciate that. And one of the things that I feel compelled to do as I continue this work, I've been at this for about 44 years, right? And I have to admit that when I was younger, in my 20s, I was very naive, and I thought that the solution to our problems was Black folk reading and learning who we are, and then acting on that knowledge. It's an honest mistake, because I saw how being exposed to the teachings of Vance Sertima and Dr. Ben and Dr. Clark and Dr. Jackson and Francis Welsing, Dr. Welsing, and so many others transformed my life. I thought that others would have a similar experience. And what I've discovered over the years, brother, is that a large number of our people are illiterate. They cannot read, or they cannot comprehend what they've read, or they're illiterate. They don't have an interest in reading. And thus they are stuck, and they will remain stuck until a process is set in motion to make our people literate again. Deborah Watkins, in her earlier conversation with you, referenced the work that we're doing right now with the Cultural Imperative Initiative. We're working with high school students at 10 sites throughout the United States. And we have a pledge that the students will learn and will repeat throughout their sessions. And in that pledge, we talk about the fact that Africans were the first people to read, write, and reason, and we did that for thousands of years. But then through the Ma'afa, we forgot all of that, and that our ancestors were forbidden from reading and writing. And the reasons for that is that our oppressor knew that as long as you could read, you could connect with your ancestral heritage, and you would no longer be a mental slave. So they made it illegal for our ancestors to read and write. So we have an obligation, young people have an obligation today to read for all of their ancestors who were forbidden by law from reading, to be able to write and become literate in writing. so that you can leave a record for those who will come behind you. We have to do that for all of those millions and millions of Africans who were forbidden by law here in the United States of America from doing things that we take for granted. So reading is not a luxury, it is a necessity. Writing is something that we must get back into the habit of doing, because it is through the process of reading that our ancestors speak to us. It's through our process of writing that they express themselves in our thoughts and what is developed when we put pen to paper. These are simple processes that people have been doing for tens of thousands of years. So we have to impress upon our people the need to go back to the source, to go back to the fundamentals. Technology is fine. I love the fact that we can use Zoom, we can use all of this technology to speak across vast distances, but technology alone is not going to cut it. What is going to happen when the plug is pulled and there's no more electricity? When you can't get on the internet, when you can't use your cell phones, what are you going to do? How will you function? So learning how to read, learning how to research, learning how to apply what you've read and researched in your life is fundamental to living. And I feel that it is of the utmost importance that we impart these survival skills to anyone who's willing to take the time to learn, that we have to return back to the ways of our parents and our grandparents. You know, we got to get back to nature. You know, it's all right to take advantage of these modern technological conveniences that we have, but we also need to know how to grow our own food. We also need to know how to heal ourselves and keep ourselves healthy. We also need to know how to become more communal in our interactions with each other, because those skills will become direly necessary as this society shifts. It's shifting already. And one does not have to be a mind reader to see that the future of America is going to be quite profound, profoundly different than what it has been over the last 20 or 30 years. America has peaked in terms of its greatness and is now on the descent. So having an understanding and appreciation of history teaches you that every civilization rises and falls, and that the fall of a civilization is not necessarily the end. It is a segue into a new beginning. And so those new beginnings are determined by people who are prepared, who have knowledge of the past and are prepared for the future that is coming. So I think the next 10 years of my life will be dedicated to spreading this message to those who are willing to receive it, that there is no death, there's only life after life, and that we have always come back, and that by understanding and aligning yourself with the traditions of our ancestors, we can better understand how to make the most of the time that we have in this life, so that we can set the stage for better times to come in the next life. This is how the process works. And those in power know that this is the only process that has ever worked throughout mankind. So it is an opportunity to, I guess, raise the awareness of people who are ready to move forward into a new day and become the masters of their destiny. And by doing so, we will again become the vessels through which our ancestors will breathe, speak, and do their best work. And the world will be the beneficiary of the things we bring into existence. That's the process, brother.
I say, well said, Baba.
So you're going to be bringing up shortly another dynamic brother, Dr. Chike Akua, who, like myself, was profoundly influenced by the writings and teachings of Asa Hilliard. He's now a professor at Clark, and he is in a wonderful position to pour himself into the students who sit in his class on a regular basis. So this is all a part of what is regarded as the intergenerational transference of knowledge, the intergenerational transference of spirit. That is what this journey has always been about. And I'm so pleased and honored to be part of a cadre of people who understand this and who are committed to working collaboratively to shape the world that we will ultimately inherit. And it's one of the best things that I could be doing with my life, and to be able to model this for other people as an option for how we can make life better is what we live for.
Ashe, Kaumba. Yes. Yes, definitely. So he's on right now. Would you like for me to unmute his mic so he can start?
But of course, brother, of course.
Okay.
Brother Chike, I see you got some of my books on your shelf behind you.
His mute is, and this is Deborah. Oh, wait, let me do my video.
We can hear you.
Yeah, before. Okay.
Let me unmute. Okay, there you go.
Okay, and then let me.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I sure can. You coming in loud and clear, Baba. How you doing?
Oh, I'm blessed. I'm blessed. And Tony is absolutely right. I have all of his books and all of the books that he recommends. And what you can see in the screen is only half my library. I was so deeply influenced by Dr. Asa Hilliard as well. You know, when he would take us to his house and show us his library, that's what made me, have these floor to ceiling shelves built in my basement office. So, but Brother Tony, I'm an example of that intergenerational cultural transmission that he speaks of, because I have taken the information that he's written about and researched and passed that on to others as well through my teaching. So do you have some questions for me, brother?
Yes, Baba, I do. This upcoming event, what are some things that you want to highlight for the people that are interested in coming, as to why? Because you know how people are, why do I need to come there? So, if you would, at this time, table some PowerPoints as to why they need to come and to hear the information that all of you scholars have to disseminate to them on that day.
Well, what you're going to receive is information on the philosophical level, but also information on the practical level. So one of the things that consumed my practice as an educator was I was deeply influenced by the work of a Tony Browder. I was not able to intellectually access the scholarship of an Ivan Van Sertima, of a Malefi Asante, of an Asa Hilliard, of a Sheikh Anta Diop, until having first studied the works of Tony Browder, because he used a lot of visual documentation, he used a lot of pictures and images, and it was through his work that allowed me to step up to another level intellectually so that I could read the works of those other great scholars. But then something interesting happened. After having studied those things, I was then a middle school teacher, and I was faced with the question, how do I take these powerful thoughts, ideas, and philosophies, and then turn it into practical classroom and home application? And so that has been the focal point of the work that I do, is building that bridge between the philosophy and the practice. And so I teach teachers different teaching methods on how to transfer that knowledge and information in an engaging way to young people. And in the process, we've developed books, we've developed videos and DVDs. We have a, African Origins DVDs and videos. We also have a line of Black History posters, 30 of them. We also have a line of 40 African proverb posters to help our children learn that mother wit and wisdom that many of us may have come up on, but many of our young people are missing today. So what you're going to get at the Abin conference is you're going to get the knowledge and information, but you're also going to learn how to transmit that to this generation of young people. A generation, by the way, that many people have written off, that many people have regarded as unreachable and unteachable. But we know that master teachers, you know, once you've, for those who say our children can't be reached, we know that they've never seen a master teacher teach. So when you hear a Dr. Stephen Hancock, when you watch Kobe Wilkerson do his demonstrations, when you listen to a Hashem Jabbar, when you listen to Brother Tony Browder, I mean, it further demonstrates what's possible for our young people, because we are the ones that are the evidence that this can be done. And clearly there are many others all over the country and even around the world who have demonstrated this. But at this conference, you're going to get a concentrated effort from some of our best educators who are in the trenches and doing this work on multiple levels.
African culture to you, Baba, what does that mean to you? And how does it relate in our life? How does it translate? How does it live out in our life when it comes to African culture?
Well, African culture for me is everything, not only as an individual, but it's so very, very important that we understand how important culture is in the lives of our children and in the teaching process. But first, we need a definition of culture so that we're all speaking the same language here. Dr. Marimba Ani defines culture as ordered behavior. That means when people have been properly initiated into their culture, there are certain ways of thinking, there are certain ways of seeing, and there are certain ways of being. And so culture is ordered behavior. That means when things are out of order in our families, in our communities, and in our schools, then we know that somebody's been tampering with the culture. Okay, Dr. Wade Nobles tells us that culture gives us a way, a general design for living and for perceiving reality. So I want you to think about that for a minute. If culture is what allows you to perceive reality, that means if I'm centered in the best of my culture, when I see a brother like you, I see a king. But if I've been decentered and taken away from the best of my culture, I would see a brother like you, and I would refer to you as the N-word. When I see a sister, if I have been centered in the best of my culture, I see a queen. If I've been decentered and taken away from the best of my culture, then I see the B word, or I see a hoe, or something along those lines. And so culture is the lens through which we view reality. And so if we are victims of cultural genocide, and it's clear that our culture, there have been vast attempts to deculturalize us and to take our culture away from us, that ought to let you alone know just how powerful culture is. And so for me as an educator, one of the first things that I must do is create a climate of transformation in my classroom and school. I must center my students in the best of our culture so that they can use that as a lens for analyzing information, for gathering information, and to meet needs and solve problems for Black people. So these are just a few of the important aspects of what culture is and how it acts.
What is some homeschooling tools that parents can utilize for their children, for them to help their children to be self-educated about who we are?
Sure, and again, that's a focal point of a lot of the work that I do, is building that bridge between conversations like this and practical everyday activities that parents can do. And so one of my most popular books, probably our two bestsellers, would be Reading Revolution, which is a book of, it's a book of reading selections, 90 brief reading selections that are set up in the standardized testing format. And what that allows our children to do is to read a brief reading selection. And then there are 10 multiple choice questions that go along with those reading selections so that they can look at reading comprehension. They're gaining cultural awareness, critical thinking skills, vocabulary development, all of these different things from reading these brief reading selections. Now, parents love this book as well, Reading Revolution, because they're learning right along with their child. And it's a lot of information about African and African American people and personalities and events that they didn't learn growing up. Okay, so it's used in a number of public schools, private schools, charter schools, religious schools, African-centered schools to help increase cultural competence, character development, and reading comprehension. That book is called Reading Revolution. Each of the different resources that I'm going to talk to you about can be found on my website at drakua.net. That's www.drakua.net. drakua.net. Another of our bestsellers is a book called A Treasure Within. It is a book of 3 short stories in which young people have encounters with ancient African ancestors to learn about our original morals and values. Now, this book is really near and dear to my heart because it was deeply inspired by the work of Dr. Asa Hilliard. When I read his book, Saba, The Reawakening of the African Mind, and in it, he has a chapter where he talks about the teachings of Ptahhotep. Ptahhotep is the ancient Kemetic scribe who wrote the oldest book in the world. As I read that book while I was a middle school teacher, I thought, how can I take these teachings and make them real and relevant to my 7th grade students? And so I took those principles and teachings and put them in story form. And that's what kind of gave birth to this book, A Treasure Within. And then we have an activity guide that goes with it. And so in these stories, these young people go through all the challenges that many young people go through in terms of situations of peer pressure, situations of potential violence, situations of death of a loved one, but they're surrounded by adults who help them navigate through these situations. And they each have an encounter with an ancient African ancestor who gives them cultural and spiritual guidance on their journey. So that book of short stories is another of our bestsellers that people love to share with their young people, and adults love it as well because it has the activities to go with it. In addition, we have a book called Words of Power that contains almost 200 quotes and proverbs from African people and African American people and powerful people all over the planet. Again, sharing a lot of that mother wit and wisdom that some of us may have come up on, but that many of our young people are missing. We have a book called The Kwanzaa Awakening, which has lessons and activities for all grade levels. And we want everybody to know that even though we're just coming out of Kwanzaa season, which is the last week of December, all the way up to January 1st, we know that the 7 principles, the Nguzo Saba, are to be lived throughout the year. And so this book has all sorts of wonderful activities that helps them to do this. Those are just a few of the resources that we have, in addition to my son's book, Sankofa Kemet, My First Trip to the Motherland, which talks about his first trip to Egypt. But each of these, again, fills an incredible void for teachers who want to expose their students and their children to the beauty, the glory and grandeur of our history and culture. It also fills another void of very well-intentioned and well-meaning teachers who want to do better, who know that our children need this cultural information, but who recognize that they themselves were also miseducated. And so the idea is you don't have to have a master's degree or a PhD in Africana studies to teach from my books. They're written in such a way that the teacher goes on the journey with the student. They're very, very user-friendly. And one of the biggest compliments that we receive from teachers and parents alike is how much the teachers and parents themselves learn as they're using it with their children and the impact that it's having on their students.
Wonderful. Well said. Thank you so much for answering that question, Baba. Next question for you is, how does one introduce their children to their spirituality, their African spirituality?
That's a good question. How does one introduce a child to their African spirituality? I think one of the best ways would be to take them out into nature. And if you take a child out into nature and you begin to point out different things to them, something as simple as the changing of the seasons, right? So we have springtime when everything is growing and starting to bloom and blossom. We have summertime when everything is in full bloom and full blossom. And then we have autumn where the leaves begin to turn different shades from rust color to brown and begin to fall. And then we have wintertime where it becomes cold in many places. Just that tracking of the seasons and the fact that those seasons start over is a wonderful metaphor for our spirituality and the cycles that we go through. It's also very intentional that I said take a child out into nature, because the word nature comes from the ancient Kemetic or Egyptian word netur. Netur refers to a force of nature, and that is one of the original names of the Most High. And so when we look at these different forces of nature, and when we look at the process of how nature begins to unfold, we then begin to understand, as Dr. Aasif Hilliard tells us in his book, The Maroon Within Us, that our ancestors arrived at their knowledge of and faith in one creator through a meticulous observation of nature. They noticed processes, they noticed cycles, they noticed seasons, they noticed the phases of the moon every 28 days. They noticed the ebb and the flow and the rising of the tides of the Nile and the annual flooding of the Nile. They noticed the sun rising in the east and setting in the west. And all of these processes, they began to recognize that there was a grand architect behind each of these natural processes, and that those natural processes were also going on a micro level within us and on a macro level in the universe. So the short answer to your question is take a child out into nature and allow them to observe, because that would be the first opportunity to engage in the spiritual sciences.
Wonderful. And your wisdom, how do you feel like music, like hip hop, plays a role in influencing, the mental faculty of the younger generation? And it's a two-part question, and do you feel like that's an effective tool to utilize to expose them to our culture?
It's a tremendously effective tool. And I think most master teachers use it in one way or another. When I first started teaching back in 1992, what's really interesting about that is one of the top songs at that time was by a group called Arrested Development. They had songs like Everyday People, Tennessee, you may remember that. It's really interesting because that music transformed my life, right? Public Enemy, giving critical cultural critique of what's going on in the community and in the country and in the world. What has really blown me away in terms of the work that I do now is now knowing and being a friend of Brother Speech from Arrested Development and being able to dialogue with him about his thinking at that time and what made him write those songs, knowing and being a friend of Professor Griff of Public Enemy and being able to dialogue with him about what he and Chuck D and the other members of Public Enemy were thinking and feeling at that time and what they were trying to accomplish through that music. And so I always utilize those things as a classroom teacher, which, by the way, Speech has a new documentary out, a web series called The Nigga Factory, which is absolutely phenomenal. If you get a chance, look that up on YouTube. The first episode has dropped, and it's just a short 11-minute clip, but it's so powerful, talking about the evolution or de-evolution or devolution of what hip hop and entertainment has become. And so these things are very important, But when we look at the power of music on an energetic level, it's very, very powerful. Dr. Charles Finch tells us in his book, The Star of Deep Beginnings, The African Genesis of Science and Technology, that in traditional African societies like a Kemet, there were certain tones that were used, tones and rhythms that were used to inspire the people, to uplift the people, to send certain messages. But there were also certain tones and drum rhythms that were outlawed, except in cases of war or danger, okay? And so our ancestors understood the power of music. They understood the power of rhythms to change and transform emotions and raise the spirit, to welcome the presence of the ancestors and draw forth cosmic energies. So many different things involved in that. And master teachers today know how to utilize music, melody, rhythms in order to communicate certain ideas, to set the tone in the classroom. So for example, in my classroom, I would often play some jazz music or some new age music to calm my students down and get them centered and ready for the day's activities and lessons. So I can't emphasize that enough, but we can utilize hip hop and we can utilize different forms of music to kind of lend a hand in understanding the lessons that we're learning. And all master teachers and creative teachers use that in one way or another.
Awesome answer. Thank you so much for answering those questions.
Mm-hmm.
Today, Baba, you know, the era that we're in now, you know, I grew up during that era too. I'm 42 years old, so I definitely recall Arrested Development. I love that group. I definitely love that group. But today in this era, Baba, you know, with all of this foolishness going on, you know, how do we tap into reaching this younger generation? Because as you know, when we grew up, you know, the respect of the elders was at a higher magnitude than what it is today. So, you know, with your wisdom, how do we regroup and get back to that place where the elders gain their respect back, you know, and you know, we're in a better posture, if you will, you know, with our younger generation?
Well, in any situation, we always have to start where people are. I have that same passion that you do. But one of the challenges with starting where people are is if you have tried to evolve beyond a lot of that foolishness, and then you have to go back and listen to it or watch certain programs that are of no interest to you, or that you actually have a deep disdain for. But just to find out the pulse of the young people that you're trying to reach. And again, these are the things that master teachers do. And they're always trying to find ways to reach and teach those that they're trying to get to. One of the things that has helped me on that journey is being willing to start where students are and to step into their world, okay? One of the challenges for me with that has been that my students had a lot of experiences that I never had before. I could not identify with going hungry and not having enough food to eat in a day. I could not identify with being afraid for my safety walking home from school. I could not identify with not having my father in the home. I could not identify with not having the proper support at home. I was very fortunate and very blessed to have all of those things growing up. However, most of the students that I have taught over the years did not. And so it really took a great deal of listening, and it took a great deal of feeling to begin to get in tune with my students, which is really interesting because this is one of the reasons why our children oftentimes say, "Do you feel me?" Or they'll just say, "Oh, you ain't feeling me," right? Because they're very relational in the way that they respond to instruction, in the way that they respond to guidance. And one of the problems with the way schools are structured and the way lessons are delivered is that it's very analytical in nature. Now, it's not that our children can't be analytical, but educational research has shown that our children reach the analytical by way of the relational. And by relational, I mean, what does this have to do with me? What does this have to do with my community? What does this have to do with whether or not I'll have something to eat, whether or not I feel safe, whether or not I can protect my mother, my sister, my brother, whether or not we will be able to pay the rent this month? That's the relational piece. But they're going to have a problem getting to the analytical piece if you don't first relate what you're trying to teach to them to their life reality. And what happens when you don't is that they opt out, not drop out, but opt out. Another thing that the studies have shown is that the opt-out or dropout process is not just a physical process of them leaving the school building, it is a mental process. So I might not drop out or opt out until I'm a freshman or a sophomore in high school, but I opted out mentally back in 4th grade. Maybe that's why Dr. Chawanda Kunjufu called it the 4th grade failure syndrome, the year that most Black boys start having the most problems and just mentally check out of school. And so this is a very, very critical issue. And 2 things come to mind related to that. One of them is miseducation, which you're probably familiar with, Dr. Carter G. Woodson's book, Miseducation of the Negro, written way back in 1933, which has tremendous implications for today. Miseducation dealing with the fact that you're not being taught the truth about your history, your culture, or what it will take to be successful in this society. But Imwali Mubaruti has also brought us the concept of diseducation. So miseducation is, you've lied to me. You haven't taught me the truth. Diseducation is, a person can be miseducated, but still go on and get their high school diploma, get their college degree and advanced degrees beyond that, but they become knowledgeable in European concepts. They can still be miseducated though. But diseducation says, you lied to me so much, now I don't want to learn anything. You ever seen a young brother or sister like that? They have completely checked out. They are no longer available to receive any guidance mentally because they've been lied to so much. So you got miseducation and diseducation. And all of these are just a number of the things that we have to deal with as educators, as elders, that are going to have to be very, very patient in the way that we bring our young people along to where we want them to be. But I'm so very thankful that in my days of ignorance, there have been those trusted elders who lovingly gave me guidance in my days of ignorance to bring me to a point of consciousness and competence. And that's the same type of patience and love that we must have as well.
Well said. Well said. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. This completes my question and answer session. Baba, the floor is yours if you would like to freelance and share any closing thoughts that you have for the audience out there.
Well, I really want to encourage people to come to the ABEN conference. ABEN, of course, once again, stands for a Black Education Network. I don't think that it's any secret that we're in a state of emergency, okay? And if we don't know that we're in a state of emergency, then that's problematic. It's been said that if you don't know that we're at war, it's because you're not fighting. And a lot of people may not be aware of the scope of the situation because they're just focused on their classroom of students or their school or their child if they're a parent. But because I travel all over the country and I see these things wherever I go, whether I'm in Chicago, whether I'm in Philly, whether I'm in New York, whether I'm in Orlando, West Palm Beach, or Miami, whether I'm in Fresno, LA, all these different places, Detroit, Atlanta, where I'm based, we see the same phenomenon. It's like a program that has been very, very effectively released on our people. Well, the great thing about the conference this weekend is that we're going to be addressing these issues head on with specific solutions. We're not just going to talk about the problem. We'll contextualize the problem so that we can better understand the problem, but then we come with specific solutions that teachers, administrators, counselors, and parents can enact immediately. And then we can point them directly towards resources that we will have on site in the form of books, DVDs, videos, posters, the whole nine. And so I can't emphasize enough that people should get registered as soon as possible. It's only $50, which is unheard of as it relates to an educational conference. Most conferences usually range anywhere from $400 to $900, literally, not exaggerating at all. And so we really need to take advantage of this, especially with the top tier teachers and scholars that we're going to have on hand. And so that website, for those that are listening, is abenforace.org. That's ABEN, as in a Black Education Network, ABEN, the number 4, ACE, ACE, as in Academic and Cultural Excellence.org, abenforace.org. And then also, Brother Mari, I'd just like for everyone to know that the things that I've spoken about are concepts that this knowledge and recovery of this knowledge, I regard this not as optional, but essential. We're at a point that if we don't lay claim to and lay hold of these ideas and take them to the young people, we're in danger of losing an entire generation. And so we really have to be very, very intentional about this work, because there are others who are very, very intentional on destroying our children. And it's happening as we speak. And so I really look forward to seeing those that are listening right now and who are viewing at the conference this Saturday in Atlanta at the historic Auburn Avenue Research Library. It's going to be absolutely phenomenal. And I definitely want to give a shout out to Sister Deborah Watkins, who is an amazing organizer, an amazing educator and master teacher and fundraiser, and all the efforts that she has put into organizing this is so important and so very powerful. In addition, I want to send a shout out to Brother Tony Browder, Dr. Stephen Hancock, Brother Kobe Wilkerson, Hashim Jabbar, and my elder, Dr. Joyce King. All of them are absolutely phenomenal, and it's going to be an amazing conference.
Wonderful. Well, for my queen, Amari, and I, Baba, we thank you so much for coming on and sharing your wisdom. And we pray blessings upon the event. May the ancestors be with all of you. And we're definitely looking forward to working with all of you here in the near future. Let me open back up the mic to see if Queen Deborah has anything to say. Do you have anything else to say, Queen, in closing?
No, thank you. I just want to thank Tony Browder and Dr. Chike Akua for taking time out of their extremely busy schedules to get on the program today. I also want to thank Kevin Dorival, King Kevin, for connecting us with you, Amari, because he used to live in Florida, and he just said, "Oh, you have to get on his show. He kept stressing me, you have to get on his show. You have to get on his show."
Hey, appreciate that, Brother Kevin. Appreciate you, man.
That's Brother King Kevin, and King Kevin will be. Right. He will be delivering one of our spoken word pieces at the conference on Saturday. I met him. I don't know if he told you. I met him when Tony Browder was doing one of his fundraisers in Atlanta in October, and he was in the audience along with a large crowd of other people, and he just approached me and just said he would love to work with the Black Education Network. While Dr. Akua was speaking, I was actually on Facebook looking at all of the many comments that have come in from a number of your viewers, and I have been responding to your viewers. And I noticed that it was shared by 25 people, and I shared it on a Ben's page. So hopefully those who didn't get you live or didn't get us live today will have an opportunity to look at the video before it's not archived anymore. But yes, I just wanted to thank you. Mart, you were just so kind and loving and patient. You know, there were a lot of us, you know, trying to pull this off, and you never once was impatient with us. And so we appreciate brothers like you.
You're welcome. I love all of you. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart.
Yeah, it's hard to find people who are conscious and serious. As Dr. Akua pointed out, we are in a state of crisis. If people are not aware, as Tony Browder pointed out, this country is in a decline, and you know, we don't have to go with it. You know, as African people, we need to get ourselves together, and it starts with our children. You know, I am a 42-year veteran educator. You know, and
wow.
the reason I'm doing this work still,
Long as I've been living.
I was gonna say, as long as you've been living. Right. I've been in this work for 42 years. 42 years. It has been my passion. I've just been blessed to connect with amazing people like Dr. Joyce King, you know, Dr. Chike Akua, Tony Browder, Hashim Jabbar, Kobe Wilkerson, Dr. Stephen Hancock, all of the people who, you know, we see who will be at the conference on Saturday. One of your viewers asked if we could bring this to Florida. How do we get this? She said this should be all over the country. How do we get this all over the country?
Wonderful.
So I responded to her, and I said that part of the idea was when these 4 men, plus we added Hashem, when they were the speakers at our 2017 conference at Stanford University in partnership with their School of Education. It's one of the #1 schools of education in the country. When those men were there, they were so incredibly well received by the audience, the attendees, that I decided, okay, we need to take them on the road. And so they became the dream team.
Absolutely.
And so we've been in Philadelphia, we've been in Chicago, we're going to now be in Atlanta. And I told your viewer, I said, we will come if you will pay. You know, so there is, of course, there's a cost associated, you know, with the convenings. The reason why we're able to keep it at such a low cost, like Dr. Akua said, $50 is a bargain. And the reason we were able to keep it at such a low cost is because I did raise the money. I'm a fundraiser as part of my job as the founder and executive director of a Black Education Network. I raise money. I've raised millions of dollars for my own nonprofit over the past 18 years. And what I love to do with that money is to feed it right back into the community, right back into the Black community, by hiring these brilliant scholars. Yes, hiring these brilliant scholars, hiring Black caterers, hiring Black, you know, printers, graphic designers. You know, we like to hire our own, you know, cooperative economics, right? So all I want to say is that, again, we thank you for having us on your show today. It will be an amazing conference. We're looking forward to seeing people, you know, even if people are in Florida or they're in some other part of the country, if they know people in Atlanta or in the state of Georgia. Listen, we have people that are registered. They're coming from Seattle, Washington, Sacramento, California, Detroit, Michigan. You know, they're coming from South Carolina. People are coming from all over the country for this conference. So even though it's being held in Atlanta, people are coming from all over the country. So we want to just encourage your listeners, your viewers to help us spread the word. January 8th is the deadline. And thank you, Brother Amari, for putting our website on in your comments feed on Facebook. I also made a link to our Facebook, our website, so people can go click on, you know, when they get on the homepage, click right there on the flyer graphic, and it will take them to the portal for registration. So that's all. We just want to thank you again for giving us this opportunity, and
my honor.
Sign off.
Yes, my honor and pleasure. And that actually was my queen that did that, because we have very close associated names. It's Amani and Mari. So Queen, I thank you for posting that information for the panelists that's going to be speaking there. So we appreciate all of you again. Thank you, Queen. We appreciate you. Now I can say Mama.
right.
I can say Mama. So we appreciate you, Mama.
Thank you very much. It was an honor. So good evening.
Good evening, everybody. Everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. Again, as Queen Mother has stated, if you would be so kind to start sharing and inviting, that will be great. All right. So we thank all of you once again for tuning in. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody. Thank you once again. Remember also, you can follow the speakers on YouTube as well. Okay, so a lot of the speakers that you've seen on the panel today, they are on YouTube. I was asked that question earlier by my cousin. So cousin Darius, thank you so much for asking that question. We greatly appreciate that question. So yes, you can find them on YouTube. I literally listen to both of them, and so they have some powerful information. You think you received some information tonight? I'm telling you, you want to go to their YouTube channel. I promise you. I subscribe to their channels as well, and I listen to them periodically too. And I've grown so much. I've even learned so much on this evening, and this is what it's all about: educating our people. So again, we love you. From my queen Amani and Mari and I, El Kebalan Unity Alliance. I'm the founder. She is the co-founder. We appreciate you. And we pray that you continue to enjoy the rest of your evening and that you have a joyous and prosperous week. Peace, love, power to all of the people.